So till now we have covered nature of personality and theories of personality, particularly from the Western perspective. However, Indian perspective has a unique way of understanding personality. So in today's lecture, we shall cover Indian perspective on self and personality, and then we'll discuss two theories of personality, that is the Triguna theory and the Panchkosh theory. To understand personality from the Indian perspective, let us first understand the concept of self in Indian psychology. According to the Indian perspective, primarily Vedanta and Sankhya Yoga schools, self or true self is also known as Atman or Brahman or Purusha, and it is pure consciousness or consciousness as such. Self is vast, limitless and all-pervasive, characterized as a composite state of existence, consciousness and bliss, Sat, Chit, Anand. The person, however, which is the unit of analysis in psychology, it is embodied consciousness. So the self is consciousness as such, which makes it possible for one to have experience, be conscious, to know, feel, enjoy and suffer. It is also important to note that true self in Indian thought is seen as the subject who experiences the world around. So everything that is experienced as an object is not true self. Thereby, the self excludes the body, one's possessions, social roles that we so closely identify with ourselves, or anything which can be seen or is open to observation. By that logic, self also excludes objects of thought such as one's ideas, beliefs and even dreams. Thus, self in the Indian perspective is experienced in a state of awareness that is emptied of all thoughts. Atman, that is the universal or supreme self, is the one which is the true self that connects all beings. Now, after delving into the concept of self, let us also look at the concept of Jeev. Atman also refers to the individual agentic self, the self which knows, feels and does things. This sense of the self is that of Jiva. Professor Anand C. Paranjpe says, Jiva, which is literally meaning a living being, is often used in Indian thought as a technical term that is closest to what a person or individual is called in contemporary psychology. The core of the Jeev is Atman or the self, which is essentially identical to the Brahman. So self, which is pure consciousness, and then Jiva. The most crucial characteristics of the individual Jeev are having sense of self or ego, capacity for imagination, endowed with intellect, an agent of his deeds, and enjoyer or sufferer of their fruits of action. This Jeev is the living self, the Jivatma, and the embodied self, the Shariratma or material self, Bhutatma. Thus, Atma is at the core of the Jiva. These ideas provide for the basis for the model of the person in psychology from Indian perspective, which is basically a composite of body, mind, and consciousness. It is also important to note that Jiva is gender neutral. Now, personality that we study in psychology belongs to the Jeev and not the Atman. Atman is beyond qualities. It is Nirgun. The qualities, the attributes that we talk about in personality belong to Jiva. The Indian perspective on personality is drawn from various Indian philosophical traditions like Vedanta, Sankhya, Yoga, Buddhism and many more. The Indian approach offers a more holistic understanding of human nature, deeply entrenched in the ancient philosophical and spiritual traditions. Indian psychology views personality as a dynamic interplay of the mind, body, spirit and consciousness that we have already seen. In contrast to the Western perspectives that compartmentalize personality. If you would recall, in the theories of personality from the Western perspective, we talked about personality as a set of traits or type, or as Freud said, that it is compartmentalized into id, ego and superego. It could be a set of behaviors or cognitions. However, in the Indian concept, the personality is a more holistic in nature. Indian psychological thought, the term personality has not been very commonly used or used in a strict sense. The concept that comes closest to the construct of personality is Swabhav. Each individual separate existence, the jiva, has a swabhav or nature and acts according to it. It is the intrinsic or essential nature of all beings, the truth of all beings, the truth of our existence. In Bhagavad Gita, it is emphasized that actions performed in accordance to one's swabhav also aligned with one's dharma. Dharma is the moral law governing individual conduct. And when our actions are aligned with our swabhav and our swadharma, they lead to spiritual fulfillment. To recapitulate what we have discussed till now, we talked about self in the Indian psychology, which is pure consciousness, the subject that is all-pervading and connects us all, referred to as Atman or Brahman. Each individual person is the consciousness mind-body composite, referred to as Jiva, the agent of action. Personality belongs to the realm of Jiva. Each Jiva's actions, when aligned with their intrinsic nature or swabhav, leads to fulfillment. Now with this understanding of self and personality in Indian psychology, let us look at the two prominent theories. The first theory is the Triguna theory, which is from the Sankhya perspective. According to Sankhya Darshan, every living and non-living being is made up of three gunas: Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. Different combinations of Triguna form the basic elements of everything in this universe. So whether it is living or non-living being, each thing is made up of the three gunas. Bhagavad Gita carries Upanishadic wisdom in its essence and is a very practical teaching for ordinary folks like us, and it talks about the three gunas extensively. The three gunas are inseparable and have dynamic nature. Gunas manifest and impact our experience in all domains. So it is thought, it's speech, action, behavior. They govern the entire psychological and physiological processes of an individual, of the jiva. Shilpa and Murthy in 2012 branded gunas as psychological attributes responsible for the manifestation of behavior and bringing differences in personality. So what they are saying is, gunas are the psychological attributes that bring about differences in thought, speech and action of an individual. Each gun contains a few characteristic qualities which are indicators of the presence of the guna in behavior. Now before we delve into the three guns, let us talk about the parable of the three robbers from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna Paramhans. So Ramakrishna Paramhans narrates, a merchant with some valuables traveling alone had to pass through a forest to his home in the city. While he was going to his home, he had to pass through a dense forest, and while walking, he was captured by three robbers who took away all his prized valuable possessions and wealth that he was carrying. Then the first robber said, "Let us kill him." So after they had taken away all his belongings, the first robber said, "Let us kill him." The second robber argued, "Why incur the sin of killing him? Let us tie him up firmly to a tree." The second robber's advice was followed, and they went away, leaving him to his fate, tied to the tree. After some time, the third robber returned, unbound the merchant, and took him to the edge of the forest along a road leading to the city, which could be seen at a distance. The merchant, when freed by the third robber, thanked him profusely for his kindness and earnestly requested him to accompany him so that he could be suitably rewarded on reaching home. However, the third robber said, "I cannot come with you to the city as I will be recognized as a robber by the police and caught." Now the interpretation of this parable. Sri Ramakrishna himself offers the explanation and says, the first robber was tamas, showing the quality of pramad, acting on impulse. The second robber was rajas, exhibiting the quality of binding to the pleasures of the sensory world. Hence, the merchant was tied to the tree. The third robber was sattva, who showed the qualities of kindness and compassion. Nevertheless, he was still a robber, illustrating the main and central theme of the Gita chapter, that in order to achieve spiritual liberation, moksha or mukti, one has to transcend the guna of sattva also and become Trigunatit. What it implies is that we need to be established in the guna of sattva without ego or ahankar. We must be constant in purity, virtue, and goodness, but not be identified with or proud of one's sattvic activity. Let us now look at the qualities of sattva, rajas, and tamas. Sattva, meaning light, quality of illumination, goodness, harmony, knowledge, dutifulness, wisdom, austerity, righteousness, truth, non-violence. So everything good is associated with sattva. Rajas is associated with dynamism or activity. It is the quality of passion, lust, anger, greed, desire, activity and change, thirst for power and wealth, arrogance and deceit. Tamas, that is associated with darkness, is the quality of inertia, ignorance, dullness, delusion, distortion, confusion, lethargy, indolence, sadness, procrastination, sleep, negligence. Now, if you look at the personality types that are based on these three gunas, Professor S.K. Kiran Kumar has said that all the three gunas are present in all individuals. However, it is the dominance of one over the other which leads to the labeling of the person as sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic type. The human evolution involves increasing the sattvic characteristics that we also saw in the parable of the Sri Ramakrishna. So the sattvic person is someone who has discriminative intellect, which means the person is able to discriminate the good from the bad, is serene, equanimous, steadfast, is virtuous, generous, gentle, who is detached and duty-bound without expectations, a seeker of self, unaware of the unity of underlying all diversities. A sattvic person is someone who is engaged in performing their duties without attachment to the results of their actions. They work with resolution and zeal regardless of success or failure. They understand right and wrong. They enjoy the kind of happiness that initially feels like poison but like nectar in the end. The rajasic person is someone who is driven into action by passion, is restless, is struggling, who has more desires, strong likes and dislikes, and pursues sensory pleasures. A rajasic person is attached to their social role. They lack clear discrimination, have distorted understanding, are egoistic. They try to understand the reasons for differences among the varied entities in the world. The sattvic person is one who recognizes the unity of the world. However, the rajasic person tries to understand the reasons for differences among the varied entities in the world. They work with great effort to satisfy desires and bolster the sense of ego. They seek fruits of their action. They are driven by greed and moved by joy and sorrow. They are mistaken about what is right and wrong. They enjoy sensual pleasures that feel like nectar at the outset but turn out to be poisons in the end. And the last, the tamasic person. The tamasic person is someone who is depressed, lethargic, disinclined to work, negligent, undisciplined, arrogant, hostile, indecisive, ignorant, inadvertent, uncertain, dull. They tend to carry on without trying to understand the reality behind appearances or causes leading to changes. They turn to work in an obstinate, indolent, despondent, and procrastinating manner. They are stubborn in clinging to unwholesome habits such as laziness, fear, grief, depression, arrogance. They tend to be addicted to the pleasure of sleep, sloth, and negligence, which deludes the soul from the beginning to the end. Now, all human beings are constituted by these three gunas, mixed up in different degrees in various combinations which determine their conduct and behavior. In the Ramayana, the conduct and character of the three brothers born to same parents serves as a fitting example. Ravana was the embodiment of Rajas, Kumbhakarna of Tamas, and Vibhishan of Sattva. If I were to give you a Bollywood example, perhaps Devdas would be Rajasic, Kabir Singh and Ranbir Kapoor's character Vijay Singh in Animal would be Tamasic, Deepika Padukone's Piku, Rani from Queen, or Rancher from Three Idiots would be Sattvic. All the three gunas exist in a person at all times. There is no either or situation in this regard. So we may not expect pure types as individuals do not neatly fit into categories. As I said before, a certain level of predominance of one or the other guna may persist in a given thing or person. And that indicates which particular guna is predominant in the person. The gunas are dynamic in nature. The relative balance among the three is not fixed forever. So if I were to have 60% of sattva, 20% of rajas and 20% of tamas, it is not going to be constant throughout my life. An individual can oscillate between these three gunas and their qualities under various physical, psychological and social influences. For example, seasonal variations in the environment. We all would have heard about seasonal depression. So when the sun is not there, it is mostly cloudy, people demonstrate a change in their behavior. It is because the balance of the three gunas also changes. The kind of food that we consume, in fact, the food has also been classified into sattvic food, rajasic food and tamasic food. Changes in life situations, family conditions, all these various factors have an influence on the balance of the three gunas. Studies by eminent scholars support the dynamic nature of Triguna. Wolf and Abel 2003 reported an increase in Sattva Guna by chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Sedgmeyer in 2014 linked the dominance of the Sattva Guna with psychological well-being as compared to Rajas and Tamas. So a Sattvic person is supposed to be more psychologically healthy. Thus, Guna as a personality type may be conceived both as a trait that persists over long periods of time as well as a state which is manifest temporarily under certain conditions but not usually. Let us now move on to the second theory that we will be discussing today, which is Panchakosha theory. It is from the Vedantic view. Discussed first in the Taittiriya Upanishad, the Vedanta explores human individuality into 5 layers of existence. The 5 sheets or koshas envelop one another with the Atman, their true self, at the center. Now these 5 sheets are the Annamaya Kosh, the Pranamaya Kosh, Manomaya Kosh, Vijnanamaya Kosh and Anandamaya Kosh. You can look at the image here. The Annamaya Kosh is the gross body, the Pranamaya Kosh is the life body, the life force, Manomaya Kosh is the emotional body, the mental sheath, Vijnanamaya Kosh is the wisdom sheath or the intellectual sheath, and Anandamaya Kosh is the bliss body. These layers have been depicted in the form of spherical sheets or koshas. You can also imagine an onion and the various layers of the onion, through which the consciousness of the seeker must evolve to reach the all-encompassing experience of fullness of the self. So to reach the all-encompassing experience of the true self. So beyond and obscured by these layers, the very essence is the self. So the self, the Atman or the Purusha, is obscured by these layers, these 5 layers. You can imagine a lamp, and to cover the lamp we have lampshade. So you put one lampshade, then you put another lampshade, then you put third, then you put fourth, then you put fifth. And by the time you put the 5th lampshade, the light of the lamp, so to say, becomes dimmer and dimmer. So we can conceive of the Panchakosha in that context, where the light is indicative of the Atman or the Purusha. However, it is obscured by these layers. But at the very essence is the self, the Atman, the Purusha, the Satchid Ananda. A series of coverings or sheets or kosha obstruct the experience of this original condition of Satchit Anand. Now let us look at each sheet in detail. The Annamaya Kosh is the physical sheath. Anna is the food. So it is the grossest of the sheets, being constituted of food which is physical in nature and thus refers to as physical body. The word sheath does not refer to any physical structure beyond this sheath. So the only physical structure that is there in this particular understanding is the Annamaya Kosh. This sheath is regarded as the medium of enjoyment for gross objects through the physical senses. This sheath is concerned with our physical existence, birth, growth, maintenance, change, death, decay are its qualities. The body is used as a valuable source of information, as a vehicle for action. So the Annamaya Kosh is used as a vehicle for action. Since body provides us an enormous amount of data about the world and about our inner knowledge states, we begin our journey with the physical dimension and then travel inward through increasingly more subtle levels. And you would see that in yoga, we practice asana because by practicing asana, we become more aware of the Annamaya Kosh and we also make the Annamaya Kosh lighter. The next is the Pranamaya Kosh, the energy sheath. It is the vital force that enlivens our body. This level of being is associated with the breath, the prana, the fundamental life force. It is also associated with our feelings and emotions. It stands specifically for the field of energy that penetrates and surrounds the physical body. Prana is responsible for the various physiological functions within the body. It plays a critical role as the mediating link between the body and the mind. The Upanishads prescribe various meditations on prana to raise consciousness from the body to a higher level of the life force. We all know about the pranayams that are prescribed to become more aware of our prana and to be able to control our prana. Consciousness on the level of the Pranamaya Kosh is more subtle and powerful than that of the first covering, that is the Annamaya Kosh. The third layer is the Manomaya Kosh, the mind sheath. Mental functions like thinking, doubting, perceiving, also seen as the lower mind. Now, if you look at the Manomaya Kosh, as we said, the Pranamaya Kosh, so to say, becomes a mediating link between the body and the mind. And it is the mind sheath where all the mental activities that are commonly captured in the Sanskrit term manas, the root man meaning to think, happens. The manas is the sensory motor mind, which thrives on the material gathered from the senses of hearing, touch, sight, taste and smell. Its functions relate to perceptual organization. So in a way, you can look at it as an information processor. It is the level that receives signals or impulses from the external world through the senses, organizes the sensory data, processes the thoughts, emotions and meaningful patterns, influences the Prana Kosh and channels the way one thinks. After the Manomaya Kosh, we have the Vijnanamaya Kosh, which is the intellectual sheath. Now, Vijnanamaya Kosh is also called the higher mind. It is the seat of decisiveness, willpower and ego. Vijnana means certain knowledge. It includes the three mental activities of feeling, willing and knowing. It is the intuitive faculty that is not given its due importance in psychology. Identified with higher mental functions, often expressed in the term buddhi, that consists of intellect, the ego, the sense of individuality, and the chitta, the informational memory. Vijnanamaya Kosh represents not only cognition but also intellect and wisdom. It is different from the Manomaya Kosh because it represents the consciousness, that is the discriminative part of the mind that discriminates the right and the wrong deeds. It can decipher what is good and what is bad, what is right and what is wrong, what is healthy and unhealthy for me. This is the organ of deep philosophical thought and metaphysical intuition. All these three koshas, the Pranamaya Kosh, the Manomaya Kosh and the Vijnanamaya Kosh, they belong to the subtle body. The fifth and the last kosha or the sheath is the Anandamaya Kosh, the causal body. The Anandamaya Kosh or Anandamaya refers to that intrinsic condition of blissfulness, the deepest and most subtle in human personality. This layer forms the subtlest of the sheaths. So we are moving from the gross to the subtle to the subtlest of the sheath. It is the first of the koshas surrounding the Atman, the eternal center of consciousness. When one transcends all the previous layers, one is in bliss with life, which is the highest dimension of our existence, devoid of any emotion and a silent state of mind. So it is devoid of emotion, hence calm, and a silent state of mind, thoughtless. This is the most harmonious state of mind possible, associated with states of ecstasy and rapture without attachment to any object. This is the body one enters whenever a desire is fulfilled. Also in a thought-free state, which is characteristic of deep meditative absorption and more familiarly in deep sleep. Now these are the two theories that particularly have been given in the Indian perspective to understand personality. All these five layers needs to be transcended for one to realize the true self or Atman. Likewise, one has to move beyond all the three gunas, including the sattva, for one to be liberated, as was depicted in the parable of Sri Ramakrishna, where the third robber who accompanied the merchant could not go along with the person towards self-realization. The reaching of the home by the merchant was symbolic of self-realization. So only by transcending sattva also will we be able to attain self-realization. Similarly, only by transcending the qualities of nature, a condition known as gunatit, can all seekers reveal their true essence or Atman. While the qualities of activity and inertia tend to maintain the ego illusion, the predominance of the quality of harmony, that is sattva, helps create the conditions for moksha, and therefore sattva needs to be actively cultivated as far as our personality development is concerned. Thus, we see that in Indian psychology, it presents a comprehensive view of personality. We cannot understand personality in Indian psychology without understanding the nature of self. The comprehensive view integrates physical, mental, emotional, spiritual dimensions. It emphasizes the interconnectedness of these aspects and the importance of self-realization and ethical living in personal development. I hope you enjoyed this particular session. Thank you very much.